Hey, good evening. It's Wednesday, October 11th, and thanks so much for being here. Welcome to Everyday Talk 24/7. Last night we started to look at what Peter has to say about how we ought to think about the end times. And right now, with all the conflict in the world and the concerns and the strife, particularly now with the war in Israel, people are thinking about the end times again. But what we need is biblical clarity about what the end times mean. Last night, we looked at verses 8 through 10 of 2 Peter 3. So let me read verse 10 again for context. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. So this is reminding us that we don't know when this day of the Lord is going to come, because it's going to come like a thief. It will be a surprise. We're never expecting to be robbed, and that's what the point that Peter's making here. And as we looked at verses 8 and 9, God has a purpose. Things happen according to his timetable. He's not slow, but rather, as soon as the number of people that he wants to be saved are saved, the whole thing is over, and the new heavens and the earth will come. So that's what Peter is reinforcing here in verse 10. The day of the Lord will come like a thief, and the heavens will disappear with a roar. Now in verses of 11 through 13, we get the perspective of how do we live in light of what the imminent end times are, those signs of the times. Realizing that we don't know when it's going to come. That's the catch. God has a way for us to live, but it's not reference to the date. It's referencing to the fact that God will act in his time. So I'm not living according to a date on the calendar or what I can figure out or try and figure out from Bible verses and prophecies and all that, because it's very clear here. Jesus states it in Acts 1, and it's stated again here. We don't know when the Lord will come. As a matter of fact, despite all of our planning and thinking and plotting and Bible verse structure, it'll come like a thief when we least expect it. So if that's the case, then how are we to live in light of the fact that the end is coming, but we don't know when? Look at verses 11 through 13. Since everything will be destroyed in this way that we just read about, what kind of people ought you to be? That's my question, your question. How are we to live in these times? You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of the Lord, and speed is coming. That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt into the heat. But in keeping with his promise, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth, the home of righteousness. See, this present planet is going to be destroyed. But that's not the end. The promise is a new heaven and a new earth, of which this one is only a foretaste. That's what will come. That's what the day of the Lord will bring. In light of that, how should we live? Well, you ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day. And even speed is coming, because why is the earth still here? Because God has more people he wants to save. And he wants us to be engaged in that, but not maybe in the way that we think. Not simply in passing out tracts or buttonholing people on the street, but following the practice that was in the New Testament church. And Peter talked about that. In his first book, also in chapter 3, he says this: whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. You must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. See, our hope is in God's faithfulness here because God is watching over us, even now, even in these times of uncertainty. God is working out his plan according to his eternal purpose. And in the midst of all the turmoil, who's going to hurt you, harm you, if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for doing what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear. Do not be frightened. Do not fear what the world fears. Do not fear the conflicts. Do not become on edge. Do not be consumed with dates and times the way the world is. How much longer are we going to be here? People living in fear. But rather, you turn from evil and do good. We must pursue peace. Seek peace and pursue it. Because the eyes of the Lord are on us, regardless of what the world says. So do not fear what they fear. Do not be frightened. You see, if we do not fear what the world fears, that will set us apart. And then Peter says, but in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. What's this reason? I'm not fearing what the world fears. I'm not living for what the world lives for. I'm not driven by their desires. I'm not overcome with their desires and lusts. I'm not consumed with how long I'm going to live. I'm only consumed with how can I honor God in the way that I live. For the eyes of the Lord are on me and watching me. So Peter here, in chapter 3 of 2 Peter, brings us back to this. You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and speed is coming. That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the roar of the heat. But in keeping with this promise, we're looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth, the home of righteousness. How should we live in these times? In times of uncertainty? We seek the promise. We live for the promise that God is going to make it all right. And the world doesn't judge, doesn't exist by our standard. It exists by God's standard. And he has a people he wants to bring to himself. And brothers and sisters, you and I can participate in that by living holy lives that do good to other people, that are kind and gracious, and not driven by fear, so that people look at you and say, why are you like that? And our answer is, because God is in control. I can trust him. I'm not living according to the things of this world. I don't live by those kinds of fears. I live according to the promise that God will bring us all about, bring his righteousness and goodness about, and establish his kingdom in his time. And that gives me great hope. Hey, Echo, because I'm not consumed with the fears of a world that is passing away. I'm caught up with the hope that the world will be forever. Again, I love your thoughts, your feedback, your comments. Such a beautiful passage in 2 Peter. Thank you so much for being here. Live for that hope. Don't be torn up by all the war and the conflict. Don't fear what everybody else fears. Be drawn to the wonders of God. And that's the thought for this night. And Lord willing, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Good night. Thank you for watching. May God richly bless you as you seek to live for his glory.